You know that feeling when you're sitting at your desk and you're like, I hate this job. I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing, but I know it's not this. But then the realities of life creep in and you feel trapped. That's exactly where I was. I was a single mom, stuck in a secure job until I was faced with layoffs. That day really opened my eyes because I realized that no path that you take is going to be 100% safe. So I set my non-negotiables and took a leap of faith with a baby on my hip. And I left the corporate world behind. And I truly believe that if I can do it, so can you. This is how I left my corporate job and how you can too. Welcome back to another episode of How She Does It. I am so excited to dive into this because the other day I posted on my Instagram stories about how I'm coming up on my 2-year anniversary of entrepreneurship. And that really was a moment for me where I was just like, wow, I can't believe it's been 2 years since I've taken the leap to build my own business. And my DMs were flooded with questions on how I did it. So I thought now was the perfect time to sit down and really talk to you guys about how I left my corporate job and how I've been able to actually make money and sustain my life. Because I know that feeling of when you're sitting in your job and you're just like, this is not for me. I was feeling agitated. I was feeling frustrated. I was feeling angry. All for what felt like kind of no reason. I had a great boss. I had a great job. I was making really good money. I was able to support myself, but something inside me was just pushing me to make a change. But ultimately, I was scared. I was a newly single mom. I was going through so much in my personal life that it kind of felt like there was no good moment to take a leap, to quit this job, to leave the security. Like when you have responsibilities like a child, it really can feel so overwhelming to be like, when am I ever going to be able to prioritize being happy and not working in this job that just does not fill my soul? It does not fill my cup. And I really over-rotated on things. How was I going to afford it? What does that even look like financially? How am I going to build up a company that's giving me as much money as my corporate job? That thought to me was crazy. Then one day I was sitting at my desk and I was preparing for an all hands meeting. So I signed onto the Zoom and our CEO came on for, I'm not even kidding, 3 minutes. And he basically let us know that the company was doing layoffs and that every employee was going to be getting an email within the next couple of hours, and then signed off, meeting done. And I was terrified. Because for the first time, I had this realization that somebody else who does not know me, who doesn't know my circumstance, who doesn't know my family situation, who doesn't know my work ethic, had complete control over my financial life. That's insane that I gave my power away like that. I'm a Taurus. I'm a little bit of a control freak. And so when I really sat there and I was thinking, I could lose my job today, and someone who doesn't know me is getting to decide whether I keep it, whether I don't, whether I have an income stream at 5 p.m. today or not, that's when I realized that nothing is safe. And there's this story that Jim Carrey tells about his dad, where his dad really wanted to be a comedian, but because he had a family to provide for, he chose the safe route. He worked at a factory for 30 years. And after those 30 years, he walked in one day and he got fired or he got laid off. And when he walked out, he realized he didn't choose the safe route because the safe route still had uncertainty. So all he lost in the process was the ability to pursue his dreams. And that's what I felt in that moment. So I waited an hour and a half and then finally my personal email came in and I realized that my job was safe and I was disappointed, which seems so backwards, but there was this part of me that really wanted somebody else to make the decision for me. Somebody else to force me into entrepreneurship, force me away from the golden handcuffs, force me away from this job that felt safe and secure. And when that didn't happen, I was upset, which told me everything that I needed to know about what I needed to do next. So I waited about 2 weeks and then I went for a walk. I was feeling really frustrated one morning and I decided to just go take a walk to kind of cool down. And I've said it so many times over the past couple years that entrepreneurship really is a spiritual journey. I do not believe I could do this walk alone. I truly believe the level of audacity, delusion, confidence that you need to have in yourself, it has to come from a higher power. It has to come from a place that's just bigger than you if you're going to dream that big. So anyways, I go on this walk and I put this podcast on and I'm praying to God. I'm please, give me a sign, give me a sign. And within the first 3 minutes, because my house wasn't even out of my view yet on my walk, within the first 3 minutes on this walk, in the podcast, it said, you trust God in every other area of your life. Why not trust him with this? And that to me was the confirmation that I needed to take the next step. I walked back into my house. I told my mom I'm quitting my job. And she said, okay. My mom's always had this delusional level of belief in me that I can do whatever I put my mind to, which is why I think that I also feel really confident in taking these next steps. When you have like one person that really believes in you and your abilities, it makes it a lot easier to believe in yourself. And so I decided to step out on faith. And I messaged my manager on Slack and I said, can we meet really quick? We hopped on a Zoom and I quit. And in sales, you're exited basically like right away because of the contact that you have with clients. And so I was pretty much done after that. Now, prior to this whole layoff thing, I did know that I really wanted to quit my job and leave corporate. So one of the things that I did was read the book 2 Weeks Notice. And in it, she talks about picking a quit date and like how to leave your job properly. And I didn't finish the book. I had picked a quit date that was September and I ended up quitting in March or April. But I quit off of emotion, and that's kind of something that's core to me too. I feel like in entrepreneurship, you really have to be decisive. And when you have the guts to jump, sometimes you just have to jump. Now, here are a couple things that I personally would do differently if I was going to take these steps again. Because I know what I did was a huge risk. I left my job before I launched a company. I didn't have a stable income stream coming in. There was a lot of things that were up in the air that I understand a lot of people might not feel comfortable doing. So here's what I would suggest. First is pick a quit date. When you pick a quit date, it helps you to work towards something. Like essentially you're working backwards towards this goal of entrepreneurship or leaving your corporate job. So let's say you pick a quit date that's in 6 months. You get to then work backwards and say, okay, so in 6 months, you want to define what your non-negotiables are. What is going to allow you to feel comfortable to actually take that step, meet with your manager and say, I'm done here. This is over. Here's my 2 weeks. For me personally, that was, I didn't want to have any debt and I wanted to have a savings. Because I knew that if I was going to leap into this job, which is massively creative, in order for me to function at my best, I can't be dealing with that much financial insecurity. So that was kind of my baseline. And once I knew, okay, I don't have debt and I have a savings, I can take care of my daughter for the next couple of months. I was like, there's never going to be a perfect time. There's never going to, as a single mom, when you're leaving the golden handcuffs of corporate, there is never going to be a time where you're like, you know what? Today feels like the perfect day to quit my job and leave this safe and secure paycheck that comes in bi-weekly. It's never going to feel good. And I think once you realize that it's never going to feel great, there's always going to be like a pit in your stomach where you're like, am I making the right choice? What am I doing? Oh my gosh, I have all of these responsibilities, but you can make it a little bit easier on yourself. Another thing that I think is really important before you quit your job is have a lead strategy. So have at least one strong way that you're going to get clients. For me, that was TikTok. And if I had told my colleagues that at the time, they probably would have thought I was crazy. But I just knew the power of social media, the power of TikTok, and how that algorithm works. I had spent enough time in there that I knew that once I was posting my videos, I would find my ideal client and they would buy from me. And that moment happened before I even reached 1,000 followers on my social BFF account. And that has been my lead strategy since I launched. I've never paid for an ad. I've never paid for any advertising. And I'm continuously booked out for my consulting services, my audits. They always sell out strictly from organic posting. And I think that's really powerful too, because it shows that if you just have the time, like the time capacity and the bandwidth to be posting and putting content out, you don't have to have a budget for advertising. Now, what I did need a budget for was for my website, for Canva, a couple other services that's like subscription services that I was using to get my business up and running, like the backside, the admin of things. But even that, it's very low cost when you're starting a consulting business. Product business is like something totally different. Something else that I wish I would have done differently is launched early. So I quit my job and then wasn't able to actually launch my company until 3 months later. And with that, I wasn't even posting online. I could have been posting. I could have been doing a lot of things to generate buzz around this business, who I am, what I know. Now, thinking back to being in those shoes at that time, I think the reason why I didn't want to do that was because I was afraid of my colleagues seeing it being a conflict of interest with my job. There was a bunch of different fears. So I think that's probably why I was making those decisions. I was trying to like move quietly. All that being said, at the end of the day, it really didn't matter. I was still going to quit my job. So I wish that I would have started something up first and had those foundational pieces already put into play, because then I was like on a 90-day runway of nothing coming in, honestly just being pretty stressed out about putting those foundations in. Whereas what I could have done, and what I suggest you do, is have a routine focused on your business prior to quitting. So what I mean is, like, before your corporate job, before you're even getting ready in the morning, I would be taking the hours from 5 a.m. to 7 a.m. to work on your business, and then again at 8 to 9. That's going to give you like an extra like 10 to 15 hours a week to work on your business that's not interrupted by, you're not cutting into your weekend, you're not cutting into time with your kids, getting them ready in the morning, doing drop off or pickup. It's really just dedicated time for you to put into your business to make that leap of leaving corporate so much easier, so much more seamless. And it is hard work. I'm not going to sit here and say running an 18-hour day is something that's super fun. The work that you're doing can be fun, but it is tiring. It is a commitment, but it's a commitment that you need to make to yourself if you want to live a better life that you're dreaming of. And I'm sitting here right now telling you, with complete autonomy over my life, it's 1000% worth it. You couldn't even pay me if somebody offered me a salary of $500,000 to like go back to the job that I was doing, I wouldn't even take it, because I understand now that my capacity here is untapped. And that's something that I really think not a lot of people understand with entrepreneurship. Yes, there is risk in leaving your corporate job and leaving that stable income, but there's a ceiling. It takes so much longer. My revenue right now is doubling year over year over year. Your salary isn't going to double year over year. Now, the resources that I was using when I was contemplating taking this leap was 2 Weeks Notice by Amy Porterfield. And I'll link all of my favorite self-development and business books in the show notes below for you. But 2 Weeks Notice by Amy Porterfield is going to give you the blueprint on how you can quit your job. Did I follow it to a T? No. I made a very emotional decision. At the end of the day, I'm happy I did. But she gives really tangible things that you can do in that book, and I'd highly recommend it. Second, I lived for the Ed Milet podcast. I remember in that time, I would be driving Ivy to daycare, and I would play that podcast in the car on the way there, on the way back, like picking her up, dropping her off, because it is so motivational. He really has a way of speaking that makes you feel empowered that you can do anything. And that podcast was one of the drivers, because Ed Milet has a book called The Power of One More. And a lot of you may resonate with this, where he talks about putting in the work for one more day, doing one more thing, one more rep to put you ahead. And a lot of the time, you are the one person in your family that's going to make a difference, that's going to change the trajectory of your family's path. And that to me was so inspiring. Because I've said this before, I actually don't think I'm the one more in my family. I truly believe my mom is. But I look at the generational impact that the decisions that my mom has made and how that's allowed me to do this. What me going into entrepreneurship and expanding more, how that's going to impact Ivy. It's just really cool to see the generational impacts it has when you have that mindset of being relentless about what you deserve. And I really believe in the power of putting yourself in rooms and putting yourself around people who are smarter than you. I love conferences, and I think that stepping away from corporate, that's one aspect that's really important, because you're losing your network. You're losing the coffee chats at like the water cooler. You're losing those like Slack updates. You're losing your coworkers. And so I really do believe there's such an importance in putting yourself in rooms with people who are smart so that you can stay in touch, so that you can stay relevant, so that you can stay with your finger on the pulse of things. And then get your name out there. It's so important. Now, I truly believe if you follow that strategy, you will be able to transition into entrepreneurship. And if I had used that strategy exactly precisely, it would have made it a lot easier for me. But sometimes I also wonder if we're just waiting for the perfect strategy, for the perfect circumstance, and for everything to be just right, will we ever really take the jump? I don't know if I would have. I think there has to be something inside of you that is unwavering and massively decisive. A part of you that takes that leap and trusts that you're going to catch yourself when you fall. And understand that your purpose, your true purpose in what you're trying to do is really worth the risk. Because at the end of the day, when I was making that decision, I knew that two things were true. One, I could always go back to sales. And two, I didn't want to wake up in 5 years more tied to a life that I didn't even want. My true unfiltered advice to you is believe in yourself. Define your bare minimums. Downsize your expenses as much as you can, and take a leap of faith towards your future, and do not stop until you get there. If I can do it with a baby on my hip and all of the statistics stacked against me, then you can too. And that is how she does it.